All right. Good evening, Delta Platoon. Welcome back to week 1, day 2. So now we're going to be taking a look at Git and GitHub. Everyone should have set up their Git and installed Git on their computer and linked it to their GitHub account. So, sorry, just it's like the Wizard of Oz, all my stuff behind the curtain, trying to adjust it. Okay, so Git is a version control system designed by the developer of Linux, Linus Torvalds, to basically manage versions of software and allow version control. So let's say you're working on a piece of software, you have everything saved to a branch, you add another piece on top of it, and that piece breaks everything. So you can roll that piece back and go back to the original version of working software. I mean, it's similar to, like, let's say you're writing your resume and it's a Word document and you're saving it as, you know, my awesome resume 1.1 and then 1.2, and then you get to version 20.1 and you've got 200 files of your awesome resume in your folder. Well, Git basically allows you to save all of those versions as one file, so you can add changes, undo changes. It tracks the changes, and when you start to combine it with GitHub, you can, you know, track who made changes and, you know, do code reviews and all sorts of stuff that is foundational to writing good quality software. So Git, where am I? So you can see everyone should have access to the Delta Platoon evening and weekend page. So this is GitHub. So GitHub is basically a way of storing Git data and files in the cloud. So it allows you to collaborate. So we're in an organization right now, Delta Platoon evening and weekend. And then you can see all of these repositories. So a repository, good way to think about it is a project. So each project should be, you know, a self-sustaining library or application, or, you know, something, chunk of code basically. So you go into the repo, repo short for repository, and then it's basically, I mean, it's organized like, you know, folders on your local computer. So you can see all these folders with all the different modules that we're going to look at, the page resources, the README, the git ignore, which is a bunch of files that you tell Git if you change them on your local computer, it's not going to push them up to the repository. So that'll be things like if you save your settings in your project folder, it won't push them up and try to merge them with the main branch. So this is GitHub. GitHub is the cloud. Git is the logic that makes the version control system work. So I talked a little bit about looking up documentation. So there's a lot of fantastic documentation about Git and GitHub and exercises to help learn them. But you can also access the help documentation directly from the command line. So if I go to Git Help, this is a basic primer on Git. So lots of common Git commands. So clone basically makes a copy of a repository in a new directory, and it will create an empty Git repository or reinitialize an existing one. Add to add file contents, move, restore, remove, move in RM, use less frequently, restore, used fairly frequently. And then branch, log, show the history of commits, status. So when you think of the working tree on Git, you have files that you've already saved, which are not in the working tree, and those are called commits. And then you have files that you've worked on, but you haven't told Git, hey, I want you to take care of those files for me. So those are untracked changes. Once you add those files to Git with the git add command, then they become tracked changes, so changes in the working tree. And we'll take a look a little more at what the Git status kind of looks like as we delve deeper into Git. So branch is, so you have your main or master branch, which is usually like the production version of your application or project or whatever. And then you create branches to work on bug fixes, to work on new features. And then depending upon what kind of company you work for, you combine those back into master by doing a merge or rebase. So Git Help gives you access, and it'll tell you a lot of common commands. So let's delve into this a little deeper. So first thing I want to do is go into my Platoon directory. And then I want to make a folder. So we'll call it my Git. Change into that. And then, so in order to turn this into something that Git is going to manage the versions for us, we're going to do a git init. Okay, and it tells us we're using master as a name for initial branch. Master is kind of going out of favor because of negative connotations that it has. So you'll see a lot of people naming their master branch main. So now we have an empty Git repository. And if we look at the hidden files, you can see we now have this .git folder in our newly initialized Git project. So if we navigate into that, you can see it adds a lot of config, description, hooks, info, object, refs, head. It's not a whole lot here to know about, just know that it exists. And this is how Git manages the version control of the project on your local machine. So, so let's say I want to add to my my project. So we'll say git test.txt. And now if I do a git status, this will show me the status of my working tree. So you can see it says we're on branch master. We don't have any commits. We have this one untracked file, the file we just created, git test.txt. And there's nothing added to commit, but untracked files are present. Use git add to track. So there's a couple of ways that you can add files so that they're tracked. So there's git add dot, which will add all the untracked files in the current directory. There's also git add and then the file name, which will add just this file and all the changes in it. Or there's git add and then you put a P. And this one, if you use the P flag, you can go through line by line and either add the line to the changes or keep the line if you want to break things up into different commits. But for the purposes of Code Platoon, we're almost always going to use git add dot and add all the files in the current directory that we've changed. So now if we look at the status, we can see we have one change to be committed. New file git test.txt. So to commit that, we're going to type git commit and then /m for message. So this will be the message attached to our commit, and it'll be my first commit message. Now if we do a git status, we can see we're on the branch master, nothing to commit. The working tree is clean because we made our commit. So if we want to see our commit history, we're going to use git log. And this shows us that we have one commit with this really long string of numbers and letters. The author was me. The date was today. And this is the message that we entered in when we made our commit. So this really long number right here is called a SHA. It's basically, I don't know if you're familiar with cryptocurrency or NFTs. It's a one-way hash. So this number is generated by an algorithm from our commit. It's unique to our commit and uniquely identifies it. But it's called a SHA, and you'll see these used as references to commits because it, like I said, it uniquely identifies it. Okay, so let's say I want to update my Git test and add some text to it. So let's say, hello world is customer, and then we want to save that. So now if I do a git status, it should show that there are untracked changes or changes not staged for commit, because it's tracked because we already have it in a commit. So it's a not staged for commit in our git test text. So let's say I want to commit that again, or commit my changes. Got to add them first. And then I use that there twice. So we should see nothing in our working tree if we do git status. So yeah, on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. And then if we want to see what commits we have, you can see I have my first commit message and my second commit. So up to this point, all of this is only on my local machine. So if I want to store this and share it and allow other people to collaborate on it, that's where GitHub comes in. So we're going to take a look, actually walk through this Git Poetry challenge. So I'll walk through it, and then you can work on it again on your own later this evening. So let's look at the instructions. So you might be a programmer, but there's no reason you can't express your artistic side. So this is practice doing some basic things on the command line and go through the Git cycle. So the first thing I'm going to do is fork this repository to my GitHub account. So I have my own copy, which means I won't be working on this master branch here of Git Poetry. So to do that in GitHub, I'm going to fork it. So it brings me to this page, create a new fork. The owner is going to be me. I'm going to copy the master branch only and create a fork in my personal account. Okay, so now you can see it's in Sean K. OUS Git Poetry, which was forked from Delta Platoon evening and weekend Git Poetry. So now I have my own copy in GitHub, but if I want to work on it on my local machine, I need to clone it down. So create a copy on my local machine. So I'm going to do that by going to the code menu here, HTTPS, and then I'm going to copy this URL. And then I'm going to go. I'm going to do git clone, and I'm going to, so git clone, and then I'm going to paste the URL that I copied from the repo that I forked. So So it's cloning it, so you can see it pulls it all down successfully, and we should have a new folder called Git-Poetry. Yep, so let's cd into that. We should see, a Git file. We see the README, and we see this paradise edited.txt. So now we've got a copy of the Git Poetry repository on our local machine. So now using the command line, I want to add a verse to the poem. So first, let's take a look at what the poem says before we edit it. So got some fancy old school poetry there. So 3 lines of poetry, and we want to use the command line to add another line to that poem. So in order to do that, we're going to use the echo command, which is basically going to take whatever we enter in after it and either redirect it to where we tell it to redirect it. So we're going to tell it that we want it to go in our paradise edited txt. So let's take a look at that file again. We should see now we have this non sequitur that doesn't follow with the rest of the poetry. Okay, so I'm not a poet. I don't feel that the muse is speaking to me, so I will not be adding more lines, but feel free, if that's your jam, to work on that when you work on the challenges. So now I need to push this all back up to GitHub and push it back to make a pull request to merge it with master. We're not actually going to merge it with master. So how do I do that? What do I need to do first? Can anyone help me?
You need to add it.
Okay, how do I do that?
Git add space dot.
Yep. So now we should see, look at Git status. So we have 1 change to be committed. So then what's the syntax for a Git commit?
Commit tag M with a comment.
Yep. So we'll say my not so awesome poetry. Okay, so now if we look at Git status, our working tree should be clean. We should have 1 commit. We see this is the original commit from Chad, and then we have my commit here. So in order to push this up to GitHub, we want to do a git push origin. So git push tells us push it somewhere remote. Origin is the name for the remote location. So it knows the origin from that .git file, all of your settings from the URL we pulled it down from. And then master tells us the branch that we want to push it to. So if we do git push origin master, we can see it pushes up to GitHub. So that's kind of the workflow that you're going to follow for all of Code Platoon. You make your changes, you add them using git add. So git add dot to add them all, git commit, and then git push origin master to push it up. So that's the Git flow. And then in order to actually create a pull request, we'll refresh our page. So we see that we're 1 commit ahead of this. Now we want to make a pull request. So we see, so I'm creating a pull request. You see my one change here. So to do that, I went to pull requests in the repo, new pull request. And now I'm going to create a pull request. And this will, in effect, so now I see if I go back to Git Poetry, you can see there's one pull request by me, and then also one by Matthew. So that's the basics of Git. So Git status shows you files that haven't been committed. Git add dot to add all the files in your directory. Git commit to commit your changes, and then git push origin master to push your changes to the original repository that you cloned from. And this is the process you're going to do for pretty much every challenge and all of your assessments. So what questions do you have about Git and GitHub?
Can you, real quick, just go over commit real quick. What is commit really, and what does commit do?
So commit is basically you saving your files. So when you add things, you say, hey, you know, put this in this pile over here of things that I want to save. So git add says, hey, this is everything I want to save. Git commit says, okay, go ahead and save all of these into a commit. Does that make sense? A commit is like a save. So if you save a Word document, and let's say you have versioning set up in Word, so you can see like the changes that you made when you save it, when you save that Word document, the commit is the difference between what was there before and what you saved. So if we look at my pull request, so you can see there's this commit here. So the commit has my title, it has the SHA that we talked about earlier, which uniquely identifies the commit. And then you can see how my one change is highlighted in green. So this is what the commit is. It's this one change that I made to the original repository.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. What other questions do y'all have?
By the way, what's the difference of the fork and the pull?
The fork and the pull?
Yeah.
So when I fork a repository, so this Git Poetry is owned by the organization Delta Platoon Evening and Weekends. If I want to make a copy to my GitHub account, I fork it. So when I hit the fork button, it basically takes that repository and makes a copy of it for me. So when I fork it, it comes to my personal GitHub account. And now I have this that I can work on, make changes, do whatever I want until I submit a pull request. And the pull request basically says, hey, here's some changes that I've made in my copy that I want, that I would like to add to your copy. So when I make a pull request, it takes the changes that I want to add to the master or the main, and it's a request to merge them. So if I were to, so this is my pull request. You can see I have my one change, which added that to the awesome poetry. And so if I were to merge this and then go back into the original Git Poetry. So you can see the paradise edited. It doesn't have my change, but if I merge it, it will add my change to that. So the pull request is a request to save my changes to the main or master branch. Does that answer your question?
Yep, got it. Yeah, thank you.
What other questions do you all have?
Could you go over just one more time how to initiate Git from the terminal?
Okay, so yeah. So if I want to create you're talking about the Git init to create a Git version.
Correct.
Okay, so CD, so let's make a directory called so I want to change into that directory, and then it's just Git init. And that creates all of the, basically all of the backend configuration files that Git needs to manage the versioning of this Git test project. So
Okay.
for the vast majority of the time in Code Platoon, you're going to be forking and cloning repos that already exist. Like for challenges and for assessments, there's going to be, like if we look, so let's look at the challenges for today. Yeah, so there's a practice with a pair challenge. And basically, you know, to work on this challenge, we're going to fork it to our personal repo, and then we're going to clone it, which is what the workflow you're going to be using almost all of the time at Code Platoon. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you.
Okay.